This is a great and deeply meaningful story that you should listen to because it will bring you unexpected value. Imagine coming home, expecting to spend precious time with your dying father, only to realize you've been erased, pushed out of your own family, your inheritance stolen, and the people you trusted turning against you. That's exactly what happened to Elena Carter. When she uncovered the truth, she knew she had two choices: walk away and lose everything, or fight back. What she did next left everyone speechless. And trust me, you won't believe how this story ends. Stay with me until the end, because this is a battle for justice, for legacy, and for the true meaning of family. It reminded her of long summer evenings spent running through the rows of grapevines, the warm earth beneath her bare feet, her father's laughter echoing across the land. The vineyard was more than just a business. It was her childhood, her home, the place where her mother had once planted flowers along the stone pathways and where her father had built their lives from the ground up. Held the crisp autumn air. The comforting scent felt foreign, like a past life slipping through her fingers. The call had come 2 weeks earlier. Her father, Richard Carter, had always been a man of steady hands and unwavering strength, but that night his voice had trembled. "I need to talk to you, sweetheart, in person," answered right away. Then a quiet sigh, a pause heavy enough to steal the breath from her lungs. "I love you, Elena." The words stayed with her, haunting her thoughts through sleepless nights and distracted lectures. She had barely been able to concentrate on her law school midterms, her mind stuck on possibilities, none of them good. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Something was wrong, and she would not leave until she knew what. The door creaked open before she could knock. Victoria Carter, her father's wife of 10 years, stood in the doorway. Even at 50, she was effortlessly elegant, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her silk blouse pristine. But her eyes betrayed her, not with grief, not with sadness, but with something else, annoyance, forced politeness. "I wasn't expecting you so early." "I came as soon as I could," Elena said, brushing past her into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and expensive perfume. It was a house built to impress, not to feel like home. Victoria sighed, shutting the door behind her. "He's in his study." Elena didn't wait for permission. Beat a steady drum against her ribs. When she reached the door, she hesitated only for a second before pushing it open. Her father sat at his desk, bathed in the dim light of the late afternoon sun. He looked smaller, frame draped in a loose sweater that did nothing to hide how much weight he had lost. His skin, once sun-kissed from years working in the vineyard, had taken on a pallid tone. He looked up and smiled, a weak, weary thing. "Elena," he said softly. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him. He felt frail in her embrace, as if he might break. "Dad, what's going on?" He exhaled, his fingers trembling as he reached for hers. "The doctors found cancer, sweetheart." The words hit like a hammer to her chest. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the edge of his desk to steady herself. "No," she whispered. There has to be something they can do." "Elena, they're trying treatment, but they don't think I have much time." She shook her head. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A choked sob slipped from her lips before she could stop it. "Dad, I don't want you to worry about me," he said, squeezing her hand. I want to spend time with you. As much as I can." She nodded, even as her chest ached with the weight of it all. "I'll come home every weekend. That would mean the world to me." From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching, not with sadness, not with grief, but with something else entirely, discomfort, irritation. This wasn't just about her father's illness. Something else was happening, and she was going to find out what. At first, Victoria acted supportive, too supportive, even offered polite words of encouragement. But as the weeks passed, things changed. The greetings turned short. The warmth disappeared. And soon, Victoria wasn't even pretending to be happy that Elena was coming home every weekend. It started with the looks. Elena about law school. The way she pursed her lips when Richard laughed at one of Elena's old childhood stories. Then came the distance. The cold silence at dinner. The way Victoria would stand up and leave the room mid-conversation. Elena noticed. As they sat by the fireplace, Richard sighed. "She doesn't like that you're here so often." Elena frowned. "Why?" He hesitated. "I think she's afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of losing something." The answer became clear soon enough. One Friday evening, Elena arrived at the estate to find extra cars in the driveway. Lucas's sleek black Mercedes, Madeline's white BMW. Elena's stomach twisted. She preferred it that way. Lucas, at 30, had never worked a real job a day in his life, yet lived like a king on his mother's money. Madeline, at 26, thrived on manipulation, always knowing how to make herself the center of attention. And now they were here. She stepped inside, and the laughter hit her first. Not her father's. Victoria's. Lucas's, Madeline's, sipping wine, looking as comfortable as if they had never left. "Elena!" Madeline greeted with a smirk, swirling her wine. "Didn't expect you so soon." "What's going on?" Elena demanded. Victoria smiled, too sweetly, too smug. "Lucas and Madeline are moving back," she said lightly. "You know, to help care for your father," to Richard. But he looked so happy, so relieved to have his family close. And then she realized they were taking over. Elena had been so focused on spending time with her father that she hadn't seen it coming. They were pushing her out, and if she didn't act fast, she was going to lose everything. In a way, they were erasing her from the picture. At first, it was subtle. Madeline rearranging furniture in the sitting room, Lucas parking his car in her usual spot. The kitchen suddenly stocked with her father's least favorite foods, but all of Lucas and Madeline's favorites. Then it escalated. Expecting the quiet sanctuary she had shared with her father over the last few months. Instead, she stepped into a house that no longer felt like home. Boxes lined the hallway, suitcases stacked near the stairs. Madeline strolled in from the kitchen, sipping red wine from a crystal glass, looking as if she had lived there forever. What is this?" Elena asked, her voice sharp. Tone. "Oh, didn't Victoria tell you? We're moving back in. Someone needs to take care of Dad, after all." Elena's stomach twisted. Dad never said anything about this. "Oh, sweetheart," Madeline tutted, placing a hand over her chest in mock concern. "Dad's not exactly in a position to make decisions anymore. The chemo's wearing him down. He needs real support, not just weekend visits. I'm here every weekend, taking care of him." "And yet, you're not here during the week." Madeline's eyes glinted. "That's where we come in." Elena stormed past her, heart pounding, heading straight to the study. She found her father there, reclining in his chair, a blanket over his lap. His skin looked paler than last time, his breathing more labored, forcing her voice to stay calm. "What's going on? Why is Madeline saying they're moving in?" Richard sighed, patting her hand weakly. "Victoria thought it would be best. She said I needed more help." Elena felt the walls closing in. "But you don't need them," she pressed. "I can take care of you." Her father gave her a weary smile, one that made her chest ache. "Sweetheart, you have law school. I can't ask you to put your life on hold." Victoria walked in. "Elena," she said smoothly, like a queen addressing a servant. I assume you've heard the news." Elena stood, her eyes locked on the woman who had married her father 10 years ago, the woman who now looked at her like an intruder in her own home. "You did this," she accused. "You're the one who convinced him." Victoria's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "I did what was best for Richard." Doing would only make things worse. She needed proof. That night, while the house slept, Elena crept downstairs. She went straight to her father's office, her pulse hammering as she flipped through his desk drawers. Invoices, medical records, nothing unusual, until a folder tucked away beneath a stack of financial documents. Transfer agreements. Elena's heart stopped. One document stood out, an agreement transferring part of the vineyard's ownership to Lucas. Her stomach churned. Lucas had never lifted a finger to help with the business. Why would her father suddenly sign over shares to him? Her blood ran cold. Her father's signature looked off. The slant was wrong. The ink slightly smudged, as if someone had hesitated while signing. A forged signature. Elena's hands trembled. Victoria had done this, his failing health, to rewrite his legacy. Footsteps creaked outside the door. Elena shoved the papers back into the folder, heart racing. Just as the door swung open, Victoria stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "What do you think you're doing?" Elena refused to back down. She held up the document, her voice steady. Instead, she smiled, slow and cruel. "Oh, darling," she purred, stepping into the room. "You're studying law, aren't you? Then you should know. Possession is everything. The papers are signed. Recorded. There's nothing you can do." Elena's breath caught. She knew Victoria was bluffing. Forgery was a crime, and if she could prove it, Lucas and Victoria could face serious consequences. But before she could speak, Victoria leaned closer, voice dropping into a whisper. "Eve, you'll go back to school, finish your degree, and forget about this." Elena's jaw tightened. "And if I don't?" Victoria's smile didn't waver. "Then you're going to make things very difficult for your father. Do you really want to stress him out now, in his final months?" The words were a knife to Elena's heart. Confronted her father with what Victoria had done, it might break him. Victoria was betting on that. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt powerless. The next day, Elena left earlier than planned. Her father hugged her at the train station, unaware of the battle raging behind her eyes, squeezing her hand. She never let anything hold her back. Elena forced a smile. "I love you, Dad." He chuckled softly. "I love you too, sweetheart." Victoria stood a few steps away, watching, and she was smiling. The train ride back to campus was a blur. Possibilities. Victoria thought she had won, that she had scared Elena off, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated the daughter of Richard Carter. Elena would not let Victoria steal her father's legacy. She would not let them win, silently preparing. Victoria thought she had scared her off. Lucas thought he had won. Madeline thought she had secured her place, but they were wrong, and this time she wouldn't be alone. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Aunt Cecilia, her father's older sister, had always been the quiet observer, watching, listening, never interfering. But when she called Elena, her voice was sharp. "Elena, you need to come home. Now!" Elena didn't hesitate. She had, and took the first train back to the estate. When she arrived, the house felt different, not just because of her father's absence, but because Victoria was acting like she already owned it. The furniture had been rearranged. Lucas's expensive suits now filled the master bedroom closet. Victoria's perfume lingered everywhere, like she was marking her territory. Moved on, as if her father's legacy had never mattered. But today, that would change. She stepped inside the study, where Victoria sat behind the desk. Richard's desk. Victoria didn't even look surprised. She merely set down her teacup and folded her hands neatly. "I was wondering when you'd come crawling back." Elena smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm not crawling," she said. "I'm here to take back what's mine." Victoria laughed. "You poor girl," she sighed. "You really think you can fight this?" Victoria's smile faltered. "What is that?" she asked, voice tight. Elena leaned in, her voice ice-cold. "Proof." Victoria, Lucas, Madeline, Aunt Cecilia sat beside Elena, her face calm but unreadable. She knew what was coming. Elena stood, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "I had a meeting with Dad's lawyer this morning," she began, "and I thought you'd all like to hear what he had to say. We already know what's in the will, Elena. Dad left everything to us." Elena arched an eyebrow. Is that what Victoria told you?" Lucas smirked. "That's what's legally recorded." Elena took out a copy of the vineyard's ownership records. "You're right about one thing, Lucas. The records were changed. But do you know what else we found? Lucas stared. Then his face drained of color. What is this? He demanded. It's a report from a forensic document analyst, Elena said smoothly. You know, the ones who study handwriting? Continued. The signature on the property transfer? Not Dad's. Victoria went rigid. That's ridiculous, she said, too quickly. Elena pulled out another document. Here's the best part. The notary who signed off on the transfer doesn't exist, which means legally the sale is invalid. Sit down, Elena snapped. Lucas froze. Madeline's breathing quickened. Victoria's nails dug into her palm. I'm giving you one chance, Elena said, her voice calm but sharp as steel. Reverse the transfer. Now otherwise, I take this to court, and guess what? Forgery is a crime. She knew she had lost, but she wasn't going to go down quietly. You ungrateful little brat, she spat. I was the one who kept this family together. I was the one who took care of your father while you were off playing lawyer. Elena stepped forward. You weren't taking care of him. You were taking care of yourself. And now, it's over. Lucas was still staring at the document, his entire world crumbling. Madeline, always the opportunist, turned to Victoria. Mom, she hissed. Do something! But Victoria had nothing left. Within 24 hours, the vineyard was officially back in Elena's name. Lucas and Madeline were out. Victoria tried to fight, but without legal ownership, she had no leverage. Watching the last of their things being packed into their cars, Victoria turned to face her one final time. You'll regret this, she whispered. You think you've won? You think you'll be happy here, alone? Elena held her ground. I'd rather be alone, she said, her voice unwavering, than surrounded by people who only love me when it benefits them, nothing more. Lucas slammed his car door shut. Madeline refused to look back, and just like that, they were gone. The estate was quiet that night. For the first time in months, Elena breathed freely, remembering her father's laughter. She wasn't alone. The workers who had been with her father for decades stayed. Aunt Cecilia promised to help with the business. The land was still thriving, and so was she. As she stood beneath the stars, the wind rustling through the leaves, she whispered, I did it, Dad, the pride in his eyes. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled, because this was home, and no one could take it away from her again. It's about strength, resilience, and the true meaning of family. Elena fought not just for her father's legacy, but for her own dignity, proving that sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who truly stands by your side. It's a reminder that no matter how much people try to take from you, if you stand your ground, justice will always find its way. So, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever faced a family betrayal like this? Let's talk about it below. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next story. Would you have made the same choice? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.